Hello and welcome to everyone. I'm getting some feedback here. Are you?
I heard your echo. That was a very nice echo. Oh,
Oh, maybe because do we have some?
that is really wild because we did not have that before. I've got
No,
my AirPods, so it shouldn't be getting any feedback from that.
me neither. All right, everyone, we're going to try to fix this in just a second. Oh, wow.
That is
Try.
wild.
Now do we have a... Okay, how's it sounding now? I'm still getting an echo,
Do you
everyone.
have, under your settings, do you have echo cancellation audio?
Let's go for it. Echo cancellation is on.
Mine too.
All right, guys. Well, let's
How
stick with
about
this.
that?
That sounds much better. I don't have...
Is that
No,
better?
I'm still
Oh,
getting...
it's still,
How is this
we're still,
possible? Okay, well, we've got 87 people here. Let's see.
all right.
All right, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Did we get rid of the echo? I still have an echo. We're going to ask everyone, do you hear an echo? And I see everyone coming in from Johannesburg and Texas. They don't hear an echo.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, maybe it's just us.
That's going to be crazy.
Yes, yes, it will. All right, we'll handle it. It's all right. It's okay.
Here we go.
We can do it.
I think it's a delay. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, welcome. I do want to say hello to everyone. We have Troy Lambert, who is the lead education lead for Plotter today. And he's a freelance writer, mystery author, and a multi-genre editor and nonfiction author. So thanks for joining us, Troy. We want to talk about self-editing and plotting.
Well, thanks very much for having me. And those two things go hand in hand, actually. Self-editing and plotting. Plotting. Um, Everybody plots. It's just a matter of when you plot. So that's everybody plots their stories.
Excellent. Yeah, it is. And so today we want to go through basics, and I just want to welcome everyone who's here and do remind you that we do have a free replay. So if you sign up, you will get a free replay. You can go to the link that we have at the top of YouTube, and you will also get the free ebook that we have available. So thank you so much for coming, and we will take care of that. So to get started, let's talk about plotting in general and talk about what exactly it is and why authors do it. And Troy has all the experience here as both an author and an editor. So I'm going to let him lead today and just listen.
All right. Well, so plotting is essentially, it's essentially outlining. I don't like to call it outlining because then people think of English class when they were in high school, and they think it's absolutely horrible. Um, and plotting is not absolutely horrible. It can be absolutely as creative and fun as anything else that you do. And to confess to you, I used to be a very much a discovery writer when I first started out. I would just discover things as I went along, and then my first draft turned out to be a real mess. And then I would go back and have to revise the whole thing. So um, when I got about on my second novel, when I got about halfway to two-thirds of the way through, I was like, you know what? I need to know where I'm going with this so I can finish it. Just need to know where I'm going. I need to have a plan. And so I finished plotting out the rest of the novel. And I was like, wow, once I knew where I was going, I wrote a lot faster. That's weird, right? I'm a discovery writer. That's strange. So I'm like, okay, well, my next novel, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll plan a little earlier. So about a third of the way through, I'm like, oh, if I knew where I was going, this would work much better if I had a roadmap. So I planned out the rest of the novel, and oddly enough, it went really fast. The writing of the rest of that novel went really fast. And so I figured out that if I planned ahead and I knew where I was going and I had a direction, I had certain mileposts that I was aiming for to hit, that then I would write faster. And so plotting is essentially just planning out where you think your novel is going to go. Now, obviously, it's going to take different turns as you write it. You're going to get to know the characters, you get to know the setting, and that'll change. And that's absolutely perfectly normal. You're not weird or anything. Well, you might be, but you're not weird in that area or anything like that. It's just that's how plotting works. But plotting is just having a plan. That's all it is, really. Oop, you're muted.
Yeah, I muted because I was hoping that would help, but it didn't help.
Oh,
So the question is with plotting, we have the pantsers and we have the plotters and the people who plan it all out from point to point. Is it usable for everyone, or how would they approach it differently?
oh, absolutely. So here's the deal when you're a discovery writer, really, because this is what I discovered that I was actually doing. When I discovery wrote a draft, what I would do then is when I went through the revision process, I was actually plotting then. So you're just plotting at a different time. You're plotting in the secondary aspect of doing your story. So you're going through at that time and you're making sure that everything hangs together, that there's no plot holes, that your pacing is correct, and that you come to a satisfactory ending and you resolve everything. Well, that's plotting.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just doing it in the revision process. So the key is if you're consciously doing that in the revision process, then your first revision can be the only revision you need. I mean, how many people have seen somebody that has been working on the same novel for 5 years and they're 18 drafts in? Well, what's happening is as they're rewriting that next draft, they're still not planning. They still don't have a direction that they're going. They're still not establishing those mileposts. And so
Mm-hmm.
they're basically just rewriting the whole thing over and over again. And each time it takes a different direction.
Right.
Well, first of all, if you're going to write for a living, you cannot take 5 years for a single draft. You can't. You will starve in the meantime. And my wife likes nice things. I clearly like to eat. So uh, we have to produce things faster, right? That's just the way that
Exactly.
it goes. So
Exactly.
that's the market now. That's the market now is producing things quickly, right? And
Mm.
so you're planning. It's just a matter of planning when you're planning. So actually, I mean, when I do it, I actually have a two-part planning. I plan when I'm before I write, and then I do it again when I do my first revision. And I have a process for that. When I go through that process, then I'm done. That draft is ready to go off to an editor, and I'm on to the next book. So
Excellent.
it's a two-part process for me, and I've developed it so that it works for me. Everybody has a different process, but that's how it works for me.
Right. And one of the things I like to throw in here is that, when you're planning that book, it's also essential in today's market to be planning your series, to have
Yeah.
the next book in line. So most agents and however you're going to approach it, even if you're self-publishing, you really want to have the next one to lead into. So most agents and publishing houses, they want to know your next three at bare minimum. And was talking to somebody the other day and they wanted five. And they
Yep.
need to have those done, not in process, not a plan, not an agreement, not a I will do it. And so you need to have those planned out. And great thing about plotting and planning and outlining all these different things is that you can connect it all, that whole story arc across those and how they interact and how they, the hooks and the put them all together. So it is super, super important. Even if you're not a planner, I get it. But having the concept, having the ideas laid out, it's pretty essential as a survival technique. So
It is.
it's very important. Let's talk a little bit about traditionally how was this done, because I think it's important to, and some people are still doing this. We'll talk about the tools that are available today, and that's why we have Troy here. But let's talk a little bit about what was the options prior to online tools and software and that.
Oh man. So when I first started out, and I first started out revising and plotting and planning and stuff like that, I had bulletin boards and whiteboards. And I know a lot of people used to use corkboards, and this is one of the things I like about Plotter, and we'll get to that, is it's kind of like a digital corkboard.
Hmm.
And so I would have sticky notes everywhere and then string, like going from one thing to the other. And you're laughing because we've all seen this, right? Or like I would have a whiteboard and I would have like arrows and
Hmm.
lines going to different things to show how they were related. Um, and it could get really complex.
Hmm.
And so we would do like a paper outline, right? Like a paper outline where you just A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, just like you do for English class,
Hmm.
which is for many of us brings back nightmare type things. Um, or we would do cork boards and just stuff all over the place. So you'd walk into an author's office and there was just an
Yeah.
explosion of post-it notes and stuff. But it was necessary because we have to take this process that's in our brain and somehow put it into something that other people could look at and see and understand, right?
Hmm.
And so that's a big part of the process is going through to make this into something that we can like follow, a plan we can follow and understand. And whatever that looked like, sometimes it was really, really messy. And I can tell you that from personal experience that there were just, I had 2 or 3 whiteboards, corkboard, and just had stuff everywhere. And if I came up with an idea, it went on a sticky note. And there were different colors of sticky notes for different types of ideas. And,
Hmm.
it's just insanity. Um, or just doing a standard paper outline, which really, I mean, quite honestly, just doesn't work that well with a creative brain because that's very linear and
Hmm.
very like structured. Like there's the ABCs and you do all the things right. And it for creative things, maybe nonfiction that works okay. It works fairly well. But
Right.
for fiction, no. It's not fiction isn't that way. Telling stories is not that way.
No,
So
no, it's not done, and it's really fun. It just reminds me of, I guess mystery, but it reminds me of, trying to figure out who the criminal is, and it's really, it is fun if you like to do those things, but not necessary. And how do you work with it when, when you're traveling in today's world? We're mobile. Nothing's in one space anymore, so it's really essential to have that. So now we know that there's a lot of new AI, artificial intelligence, there's fantastic softwares, there's online tools, and there's lots of different ways to use this. I mean, some people have gone from, you know, uh, doing the cork boards and the whiteboards and that if you've looked at, if you've been following us and here on First Editing, we've done some back with the Excel sheets and how you can
ooh,
outline different that ways. And there are lots and lots of books out there, and there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, it's just understanding the process, but there are better ways. And of course, it makes it easier for not only the authors but also the editors out there. So today we want to talk a little bit about Plotter, which is who you work with, and they have an online software. And I found this very interesting because there's templates and there's different ways to work together. So talk us through how somebody should get familiar with this and how it worked for you and how you came to know them.
well, so I mean, I came to know Plotter before we really had much for templates at all. It's when Cameron, who's the original developer and founder, just developed this for his own thing, and he brought it to a writers' conference and thought he'd sell a few copies. Um, and I looked at it and I was like, "This is amazing. This
Mm-hmm.
visual outlining this way is absolutely amazing." Um, so that's how I got involved with Plotter. Then when they relaunched in 2020, I became the education lead, and I do all kinds of things now, teaching me, teaching people how to use Plotter, right, and how to
Mm-hmm.
use it in different ways for all kinds of different applications. We won't go down that rabbit trail because I could go down that forever. Um, but as far as story templates, what it is so for me, you may already have like a story structure that you really like. Maybe you like Larry Brooks' story engineering. Maybe you like Save the Cat. Maybe you like something else, right? Um, and there's nothing wrong with any of those. So just because, so I've taken it upon myself to study plot structure. It may seem like a weird hobby, and it is. It's really a strange, nerdy thing. But plot structures often have way more in common than they do that is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a 3-act structure, a 4-act structure, a 5-act structure, and a 7-act structure all have the same elements contained in them. They're just arranged in a different way. And often these different templates are just, they're set up for genre, for a specific
Mm-hmm.
genre, or set up with specific terminology that just rings true with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I actually developed my own template. It's called the Sluice Journey, and it's based on the hero's journey, but it's
Mm-hmm.
for detective fiction. Well, why? Because I write detective fiction. I never intended for it to be something that I shared widely. Now it's shared all over the place, but it wasn't something that I intended to share widely because it was for me, right?
Right.
It was for me writing my stories.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, and what it does is it helps you with pacing. It helps you with plotting and pacing and making sure that your pace is correct throughout the story, and also that you resolve everything. You hit all those high points, and you just resolve everything you're supposed to resolve by the end of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what templates are. Is they're just more of a guideline for how to create your own story to make sure that it resonates correctly. Now, if you're a discovery writer, you just use this in the revision process to
Right.
see how do I line up with an established template.
Mm-hmm.
Am I good? Is my pacing good? Do I hit all the points? Did I have an actual inciting incident? Is my inciting incident at the right time? Does
Yeah.
my midpoint actually come at the midpoint?
Mm-hmm.
At the resolution, do I actually resolve everything or did I miss something? Right?
Right.
And so you're just using those templates as a guideline to see, how did I do? How did my first draft go? And what do I need to fix it? So you can see scenes that you don't need, delete those. You
Mm-hmm.
can see scenes where you say, I need to write a scene right there because I
Mm-hmm.
don't have anything. I don't
Right.
explain this here. So I need to write that. So it provides a guide for you that helps you to make the right decisions. And what I call it is like in business, making data-driven decisions. You
Exactly.
have data, it shows you what story is supposed to look like, and you go, okay, my story does not look like that. Is that okay, or do I need to fix it? And how do I fix it and make it work, make it into a story that works?
Exactly. And I mean, this is so essential because it's so important for you to at least get the concept. Maybe you can't do it all at the beginning. It is a learning, just like writing is learning. Editing is a learning process, and they are two separate events, and they happen in different parts of the brain, and it's very exciting. But why it's important to do this is because eventually you have to edit. Everybody edits before they go.
Yep.
And if you can self edit, well, you're going to save some money because editing is expensive. It is the largest
Hmm.
investment you're going to make in your book and an essential investment in the book. So if you can get through a large portion of the developmental edit on your own, if you've done it well and you've done it right, then you can come to a professional editor and go straight into the line and copy editing and get prepared to format and move on down the line into publishing. But if we're still going back to the fundamentals and how is your story arc and how did this connect here and why do I have a huge plot hole? Well, then it's going to be a lot more time, a lot more revision. And that's okay when you're learning. But eventually, as Troy says here, if you want to be prolific and you want to make a lot of books and hopefully make some money and live your dream life in that way, it's essential to start learning this. So it is pretty important, I would say.
Yes.
And the
Yes, it
templates
is.
are great. The templates are great for helping you to mix and match and to see it because I think visually that's so helpful. So as we do this, I know you're talking from both the author and the editor. It's just really good to show them, as an author, how you switched over, to doing that self-editing prior because you're still using an editor and you're
Right.
still doing this, but you're
Right.
saving some money and some time and frustration. And
Yep.
it also, I think, one of the things is as a newbie, quite often, to learn to be able to communicate in the same lingo, the same jargon, the same knowledge, the same foundation really helps you grow. And using tools also train you to recognize it easily. It's the same when you have this
Yep.
built-in, pro writing aid or whatever, and somebody's is just telling you, wrong comma
Yeah.
there, and you go,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I do that a lot, don't I? Well, this is good. So I would love for you
Yeah.
to show us. I have your screen here. Let me add it in and kind of walk us through. Are you ready to do that?
You betcha.
All
I can
right.
do that. So as you can see, so what this is, so let me explain this really quick in that this is one of my novels that is actually done, but I modified this file a little bit to show you what it actually would look like. And so across the top are all my various different beats, and including a prologue. Now, generally, I hate prologues. I have rules about prologue, but this particular story called for a prologue that is really before the story starts. So I started with that. So you notice I have a couple of different things here. First of all, I have my main character's timeline. So this book, it's complicated because there are two timelines that are happening at the same time, that are happening one in each part of each chapter. They kind of alternate chapters, and at the end, those two come together. So
Mm-hmm.
it's tricky because you have to have hooks that hook the reader through these things. And this is actually relatively long for a thriller, but most people that have read it feel like it's shorter than the first book in the series because it's paced faster. But anyway, so what I've done, you can see it on Plotter across the top are beats, or
Mm-hmm.
what you can use chapters, whatever you want. And going down the left hand side are some characters. And then I have a template here, which is the Sluice Journey, and I'll come to that in a minute. Usually at this point in the story, like at this point in my editing process, self-editing process, I wouldn't have this here. This would be hidden. When I first start out, the only thing I do is I read through the book for the first time. So you've finished, you've written the end, and you put your book aside for a while, right?
Right.
Everybody's put their book aside for a while. You haven't started working on the editing right away. You've given it some time because you're going to, and this is a hint, okay? But anyway, because you're going to get yourself, what I call it is you're getting yourself some distance from your story.
Yeah.
By getting yourself some distance from your story, it allows you to look at it objectively. As a reader, as an editor,
Mm.
it helps pull you out away from your story. And all I'm going to go through is, you notice in these scene cards, there's like almost nothing written here, just a few key points. But all I have is the headline, right? The
Mm-hmm.
headline. That's it. Well, because I already know what this scene is. I wrote this book. So I know what it is, right? But I just have those headlines there, and then I've created some tags. Let me explain to you what those tags are really, really fast, um, because there's no way I'm going to be able to demo all of this. But I'm going to explain to you why I have these different tags. So in these tags, I have the editing stage. It's either needs revision or it's revised. The
Mm-hmm.
check stage, don't worry about that. That's for me entirely. And then the next one is action level, high, medium, or slow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and those are tags, right? So in Plotter, you can go into these scene cards and you can add tags. So this one happens to be a high action type of scene. Okay. And this one's been revised. I've turned it green, that type of thing, right? But what I can do in here is go through and filter by those attributes and see which scenes are high action. Let's see, I have high, so I give the reader a little bit of a break as I move through. And you can see that everything else, it disappears. It kind of fades into the background, but it doesn't entirely disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, so let's see here. That went too fast for my scroll. So I have most of these are either high or medium action scenes. And when I get down to the climax at the end, you can see that they're pretty much all high action. Like this is where everything's resolving. This is high action type thing, and basically what it does, it lets me know about my pacing ahead of time. But when I read through my book for the first time, all I do is I come through and I read this and I say, okay, what happened in this scene? Quick, super quick little summary with a headline. Is it high
Mm-hmm.
action or not? That's all I say. It's high action or it's not. You are not allowed to edit at this point. You're just reading through
Mm-hmm.
and seeing what you actually wrote compared to what you thought you were going to write,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
No editing at this point. No go back and correcting grammar, because it's like we were talking about earlier. What are you going to do? You're going to go back and correct grammar in a paragraph or a scene that you're going to delete later. This is where we're determining what these things are going to look like. So all I would do is put them on this timeline, or in this case, I'd put them on both timelines of the first person confession as well. And I would go through and say, this is what happened in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
End of story. That's it. That's all. Right? That's part of the process. So basically, you're deconstructing your book, but you're deconstructing it quickly and you're just giving an objective summary of what happened in that scene. Boom. That's it. Nothing else. Now you can do this in Plotter. You can do it in any other program you want. Plotter just makes it really easy, because let's say I decide that I want to move this one for some reason. I decide that belongs up on this timeline. I really simply just move it. So it allows you to move things around, to delete things, to change things as you go, to really help you understand. Now, once I get done going through that first pass, that's when I start to put it on plot structure. So I go through it, I see, okay, do I have a whole bunch? In this particular case, when I was revising this book, I got to the middle and I had like 3 really slow scenes in a row. I'm like, nope, that's not going to work. So what do? Before it ever goes to an editor, before it ever goes to beta readers, before anybody ever sees it except for me, I see those slow scenes and I go, nope, we're not going to leave that there. We're going to do something else with that. Now, then this is when I put in a story structure of some sort. So I knew I was going to use the Sluice Journey. Now, in this one, so this is the second part of this process for me. I planned out this book. Of course, it went a little different direction than what I intended. And about halfway through, I changed directions. Like I decided, no, I'm not going to do it this way. I'm going to hide something and not tell the readers until the very end. I'm going to change it, right? So this is the second part of this process. So I already knew I was going to use the Sluice Journey. I already knew I had kind of followed it, but I wanted to see where I actually followed it. So I'm going to go through here, and this is one of the templates in Plotter, and you can see what it does is it has where this is in the story, and it has some things that you should do. And it tells you a little bit about this template. Now, what I always recommend with any plot structure template that you use in Plotter is that you go back to the source material, that you understand and you study where this came from. As a writer, you should always be studying plot structure. You should never not be studying plot structure in one way or another, because eventually it becomes very innate, very built into you, and you will write to good plot structure without doing it consciously, right? You wouldn't have to consciously set it up. So I actually had a gal that I just interviewed that I was working with, and I just interviewed her, and she studied plot structure for a year. She decided she wanted to write for a living. She studied plot structure for a year before she wrote her first novel. An entire year. Now, you don't have to go to that extreme. I'm not saying you have to go to that extreme, but you have to do that. So anyway, I use the plot structure to see where I'm at, see if everything's working. Now, in this case, I use 2 plot structures. I use the Sluice Journey for my main timeline. For my secondary timeline, I use the Villain's Journey, which is another plot structure, but it focuses instead on the villain, right? Because I wanted to make sure that my villain story makes sense, right? So this one was a very complicated plot. So the very next thing that I do is I go over to the outline tab on Plotter, and there's this cool thing that says filter by plot line. So I can go through and I want to see the first person confession. I want to see if this all hangs together. So now I've filtered my timeline and eliminated everything else. And the only outline I see is of this story. Now I write in Scrivener, so I do the exact same thing in Scrivener. I filter by only these scenes in Scrivener, and then I can read them through in Plotter and make sure that they all hang together. Right? That's all I'm doing. So that's those type of things. Now, when I read through the second time and I'm adding plot structure, the other thing that I do, because I write mysteries, is I have another timeline down here that says clues. And this tells me all the clues that I planted in these various different scenes. And then at the end of the book, I can look and make sure that I've actually resolved all of those clues. That either if it was a red herring, I indicated it was a red herring. If it's not, I do that. Okay. So I add that at the second part. Okay. So the second part of my self-editing process is I add story structure and I see how I'm doing. So I'm reading through the draft a second time. So you notice by this time I've read through my draft 2 times. I have not edited really at this point as far as grammar or punctuation or anything like that. But here I can start to see which scenes don't belong and where maybe I'm missing something. And that allows me to decide where I need to add or subtract. Right? That's all I'm doing at this point. The reason is I don't want to go through and edit grammar wise or even content wise something I'm going to delete. It makes no sense. So I'm just reading through it a second time. Now, the last part of this doesn't involve Plotter at all, right? The last part of my process basically involves, excuse me, that I go through and that I look, I get that distance from because now I've read my draft twice, right?
Mhm.
So I'm really immersed in the story again, and I think I'm reading what I write. And so I do two things to get out of that story. The first
Mhm.
thing is I edit backwards. So I read from the last chapter back.
Yeah.
And people are like, what? And I'm like, first of all, it's a mystery, right? So I know because I'm reading the last chapter first, I know how things resolve and I'm going backwards. And I'm making sure that things actually lead up to that resolution.
Right.
The second thing that I'm doing is I'm giving myself distance. I'm not reading the story anymore. I'm studying the chapter for the right grammar, the right structure of the chapter, make sure I have the hooks in there.
Mhm.
And by the way, I describe hooks this way. Okay. You want hooks in all throughout your story, from sentence to sentence, paragraph to paragraph, all those kind of things. But most people think of them as the big hooks from chapter to chapter. The whole idea is you want to make your book unput downable.
Yes.
So that like potato chip chapters is what I call them. Okay. So
That's a new one.
your reader just says one more chapter, one more chapter, one more chapter
Just one.
until it's 2 a.m. They're covered in orange crumbs and they don't know
Yeah.
what happened and they finish your book, right? That's the whole idea. That's the goal. That's it. It's basically just drag them through the book so that they can't let go. They can't put it down.
Mm, mm, mm.
That's what those hooks are for. Okay, so I'm analyzing all of those things as I read backwards. And then the final stage is I have macros that I've created in Word. If you don't know about macros in Word, um, you need to know about them. You need to know about them. But I have one of them specifically that drives people absolutely crazy, and it's my favorite. Okay, and what it is it goes through and it highlights every to be verb in your entire manuscript,
Yeah.
and it puts a comment by it. So you have to resolve the comment or delete the comment. Now, let me tell you, the first time you do this, you're going to be really irritated because there will be comments there that you're like, it doesn't matter if there's a was in that dialogue. It makes no difference. But it makes you look at every single one of them. And it also, again, gives you distance. You're only looking at certain highlighted words, certain highlighted things. It gives you distance from your manuscript. So basically, you're looking at the words and the writing, not getting immersed in your story to the point where now you know what you meant to write, but you didn't
Mhm.
actually write that there, right? And
Exactly.
so it's all about that distance. So that's my process. I mean, it's actually a pretty simple process, but it does involve some work. There's some work you're going to put into the writer. I wish I could tell you you don't have to do that, but too bad you do. So
Well, it is true. I mean, you really have to have this dedication. And look, you've already written the book, so now it's just making sure that the book has a chance. The baby's been born. Now you got to make sure you can get it into school and everyone. It's really taking care of it. So it's so essential to that. So we have now you showed us some of those templates, and I was thinking, how does this apply to fiction and nonfiction? Because I know we're talking through the fiction right now. We might have some nonfiction writers out there, and I know yourself, you're also a nonfiction author. So talk to us a little bit about how to use this type of technique in that. And then we do have some questions too we want to get to in the chat. So stick around, add your
beautiful.
questions, everyone. Make sure you sign
So
up for this YouTube.
So two things about nonfiction. Okay, let me tell you two things about nonfiction. First of all, if your nonfiction is memoir or anything along that line, which is very frequently people talk nonfiction, it's memoir.
Yeah,
Guess what?
narrative nonfiction.
Yeah, it's a story. Okay,
That's good.
it's a story. So your story structure is the same. People are like, I'm going to write my life story from beginning to end. Please
Okay.
don't. Please don't. And the reason is because unless you're really famous or someone's very close to you and they really want to know all the details of your life, it's not really going to be that compelling, right? We look at one of the best memoirs out there, Educated, that came
Yeah,
out last year
it's
by
really good.
what's her name? Anyway, it's a fantastic memoir because it has a theme and it has a story, and that story has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yes.
And I would bet you that it follows a plot structure,
Mm.
right? It follows a plot structure, almost guaranteed, right? Okay, so that's a story. Even if you're like, so my friend Jim and I wrote a book that's called The Tao of Trek, and it's about the philosophy of Star Trek from the very beginning all the way through the end, right? Now, but really what it is we're, in some ways, we're telling people a story, but we're also presenting them something in a way that we want to take them from one point to the other, right?
Right.
We want to take them from somewhere where maybe they don't know anything about it, or they have a little bit of an idea, and take them all the way through to where they feel like they know a lot more about the topic, right? That's what you basically want to do. And along the way, if you're depending on the type of nonfiction, you're usually addressing pain points, those
Mm.
different types of things. So you're still plotting that out. In fact, I would argue that with nonfiction, you need to plot that out even more, um,
Right.
because those points are really, really important. So we don't have like specific templates for nonfictional yet, although we're working on some that are for specific types of nonfiction. But you
Hmm.
can use, like, you can almost use any other kind of story template. Like a very common one is to use the hero's journey, because basically your reader is the hero and you're trying to take them on this journey from one place to another where they become victorious eventually. And so you can use the hero's journey. You're just going to have to change the terminology a little bit to do it for nonfiction. But it's the same thing. Nonfiction is essentially you're trying to take them on a journey. You're trying to take, and it's still a story. It's just you're making it their story, right? And that's what you're doing. So it's all story. Story is story is story is story. So
Exactly. So it's super important there. So we have the demo library, and I think we had some questions here. People had questions. They downloaded Plotter and different things like that. So let's take a look here. I just want to go over to our questions and different things. We had people asking about Excel, and I never thought of the read overing here. Okay. Let's see here. Nope, that's not the one I wanted to click on, but there we go.
oh, but that's a good thing though.
Yeah. Well, that, of course.
So what I
That's
use to match out my character stuff
Mhm.
here, if you share my screen again, I will.
Sure. Oops.
I use Plotter for that too. I didn't show that in the thing, but you can use um, so you can use Plotter for your characters.
Mhm.
So and there are different descriptions that you can use. So for my main characters, so there's things you can set up in Plotter called attributes, and then there are certain templates for characters. Now attributes apply to every character. So I always have goal, motivation, conflict, and the overall emotion that I want people to feel about this character. And then for my big characters, my main characters, I have a more in-depth character bio. For
Mhm.
my minor characters, I could care less all the different stuff about them that's in a typical character bio. But this is what I use for this. Now, often I will do things like I will give my characters a personality test that are their main characters. Either you can use Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or whatever you
Mm.
want to use, and give your characters a personality test because it tells you a lot about how they interact with different people, and that will help you see how, if you give your other characters a personality test too, it will give you an idea of how the two interact together, right?
Excellent.
So that's what I use for characters. I have different categories here: suspects for the murder, clients, supporting different people. Some of them, like nurse, doesn't really have a name, not much of a role, but put her in there. Um,
Mhm.
law enforcement, animals. I always have dogs in my stories. I get accused of really liking dogs. Um, and you might see my dog's tail pop up every now and then. I have a 95-pound German Shepherd. If he hops up on me, I'm not under arrest. It's He really is my dog. He's just interested in being part of the webinar. And so sometimes he feels that way. So this is what I use for characters. For places, I use the same type of thing. For places, a lot of times, so I wish if I had my other file up, For like I wrote a capital city murders series, and a lot of the places are actually set in capital cities, different places in capital cities. Um, and so I'll put a Google Street View link in here
Mhm.
in the description. Then I click on it. I go straight to Google Street View. I'm not tempted to go down the Google rabbit hole that we all know exists. Um,
Oh.
and then also there are notes,
Mhm.
and notes generally for me are just brainstorming dump that doesn't really fit anywhere else.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Excellent.
Anyway,
Excellent. So is there any way of compiling the information on characters, places, etc. in Plotter into a book Bible or a series Bible?
yes.
So we'll develop there.
So I'll illustrate this by saying this. So this is the series view
Very nice.
in Plotter. Okay. So this is all the books. Okay. This one's done. There's another one in this series that I plotted in a separate Plotter file because the series Bible wasn't as robust at the time. And so I didn't have it. So I actually have several books planned in this series. And this is a reader magnet that I'm in the process of writing.
Mm.
So these are the different ones inside the series, but also inside the series, I have a series view. And inside the series view, a lot of times I'll have a timeline. I haven't created it for this one yet that tells me what's happening in each book. Now,
Mhm.
your characters, they go through to every single book, but you notice that up here, I can dictate which books that they're in. So obviously, Max is in all of the books. Well, he's the lead character, right?
Yeah.
This person is only in teaching moments. So it enables me up here to filter by the book.
Mhm.
So if I filter by, let's say I filter by Baker Street instead. Well, I haven't put any characters in Baker Street yet, right? Um, let's say I filtered by 70. So I know that these people are going to be in 70 because this is Max's dog. He's everywhere. This is Zane. He's a character from Teaching Moments, but he's going to go forward into some other books. And here's a couple of people that are his friends from Seattle, where he's from, and they
Mm.
appear in every single book, right? So I can filter by the book, or I can look at all of them together. So when I'm working on a specific book, I filter by just that book. And so I just look at the characters that are part of that book, or I can look at overall, and this is my series Bible. This is all the characters I've used so far. So yes, you can organize it that way by book and by everything. So and everything shows up that way. Notes show up the same way. So I always
Mhm.
tag notes with a book
Okay.
that
Okay.
they're a part of because um, then you can filter by that book, and I don't have to look at all of my notes.
Mhm.
Right. Same thing with places, because like especially my Capital City Murder series, you can probably figure that out. There's like how many books there's eventually going to be. There's 50 capital cities because there's 50 states. Anyway, you get the idea. So that's a lot to keep track of,
Right.
right? So I filter everything by book in
Right.
these things. So
Excellent.
it's probably the most complex plotter file that I've ever created or that I've ever seen. So anyway.
Excellent. Next question. Is it easy to transfer Plotter info to Scrivener?
Yes, it is. You can export directly to Scrivener.
Excellent.
So there's an export button at the top. We can share my screen again really quick, and
Oh,
I'll show
sorry.
you. No, it's okay. So timeline right here. You can export. See this export button right here? You can export to MS Word or Scrivener, but I always, just make note of this, I always use advanced, right? The reason is, do I want the Sluice Journey in Scrivener? Nope. Do I want the villain's journey in Scrivener? Nope. Do I want the horse theft or clues in Scrivener? Not really. So in my plot lines, I can export what I want. Notice that I also have unchecked images. I don't want my images to go to Scrivener. When I write, I have Plotter open on one screen and Scrivener open on the other. I have them on two separate screens. I'm looking at both, right? So I don't want to do that. So you can choose what you want exported where to Scrivener or Word, whichever one you write in. And then you just hit export, and it forms a new file, and that's it. It's real easy, super easy. So yes, in
Excellent.
answer to that question, that's about as thorough of a yes as I can get, I guess.
That's great. So, Troy, you mentioned working with Scrivener and Plotter. Would a product like Fictionary Storyteller, everyone knows we work with them quite a bit here. All of our editors are certified story coaches. Complement this writing process, or would it be redundant? That's a good question there. I don't see how it can be redundant.
No, I would say I wouldn't say it would be redundant, but I would definitely say it would complement it. Now,
Yes.
because here's what I'll tell you. Okay, anything you can do with plot and story structure to understand it better and to make it work better for you is good. Here's when you stop using tools. Whenever you encounter anything that causes you confusion or makes you want to stop writing. If it makes you want to stop writing, don't do that. I mean, I know that may sound obvious, but you would be surprised the number of people that say, I'm really hung up on this thing. They get plot block and they can't even get to the writing part because they're stuck in plotting. Right. And I'm like, don't, please, for the love of all that is holy, don't do that, because you're going to drive yourself crazy. Right. And I don't want that for anybody. I write because this is what I love. This is what I do. And anything that makes me want to stop writing, I need to just get out of my life, whatever that looks like. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Here's one here. What do you use to map out your character story or background? So did we start with that one? Sorry.
Yeah, I think we talked about that one already. So I use Plotter. Yeah.
Yeah. The tool that highlights these to be verbs in Scrivener instead of Word. They're talking about your macros.
Okay. So let me tell you, I don't know and I don't care. Okay. And here's why. No. And I know that sounds callous right away, but it's not. I don't ever edit in Scrivener.
Oh.
I only edit in Word. Do you know why? It's psychological. If I open Scrivener, my brain knows that we are creative writing now. If I open Word, it knows we're either technical writing or we're editing or something along that line. So I don't ever edit in Scrivener. That is my sacred writing space as far as software is concerned. Okay.
Nice.
So I don't do it because psychologically, then that is my place that my muse goes, oh, I know what we're doing, and shows up. Okay. You have to do tricks to have your muse show up. You can't wait for your muse to show up. If your muse is running from you, you need to chase after her, get her, block her into an alley, grab her by whatever, drag her over and put her in the chair with you, whatever you have to do, right? That's you just have to do it. Like I don't remember who it was that said, I only write when I'm inspired, and luckily inspiration strikes at 9 a.m. every day when I sit down to write. Right?
Yeah.
Look, if you're going to do this on a regular basis, you're going to do it for a living. You have to set writing appointments for yourself. And when you sit down to write, you just got to write. There's not an option. There's not another option. So when I first started out, I had little kids at home. This whole time I had little kids at home. So let me tell you something about little kids. Like if you stay up really late to write, your little kids sometimes wander out. Hey, Dad, what are you doing? How come you're up and I can't be up? I have to go to bed. Right? You know when your kids won't get up? 4:30 in the morning.
Nope.
You know why? You can't get them up at 4:30 in the morning to do something they want to do, let alone to come bother you in the office. So I got up at 4:30. From 4:30 to 7:30 every morning, I was in a little office under the stairs that didn't look anything like the office I have now, and was typing away, writing stories. Okay, that's I hear you.
4:30 is magic time. Magic time.
You have to do it. You have to go and show up, and that's it. You show up, right? There's no other options. It's just that's the way it is. So.
All right, let's see here. We have talked about this in another one, but I'm going to show it. Are there books about how to use Excel to plot a nonfiction book? Asks a retired CPA.
Oh my goodness!
There's so many books.
There are books about that, yes, but I can't do it. I can't do it. Excel just makes me think of budgets and stuff like that. And my wife is like an Excel guru genius. She's like, oh, you just need to put a pivot table here, and then the thing tells you all the stuff. And I'm like,
they're talking about that in here.
I'm like, that's really cool. That's nice. So you just do that for me. I just share the file with her on OneDrive, and she makes it happen. So yeah, I know there are books about that. I don't know what they are because it makes me shudder to think about plotting a book in Excel, even a nonfiction book. So
It,
yeah.
I probably CPA is just loving their space there.
Hmm. I could see that. And God bless you, CPAs. Us writers need you badly.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
but
Absolutely.
yeah, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, here's your little quick answer. Story grid, and they use Excel. And we went through that
Okay.
I don't know, a month or two ago with Christina from Fictionary. We went through all the different ways of plotting and outlining and getting through the story arc, and it's just amazing. So I'm looking for any other questions that we might have here. We have a lot of great responses, especially a lot of love for your potato chip chapters. Really
Oh,
like that.
it's one of my favorite analogies, but it's really what you want to do to your reader. You want to drag them through your book and make them
Exactly.
highly uncomfortable if they don't finish. And that.
Yeah, and just jonesing for the next one, I guess. Let's
Yep.
see here. Okay, so we had a lot of people from all over the world. I just want to remind everyone, if you sign up here and you follow us, we're being broadcast on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitter, which is great. But if you come to our YouTube, you can follow us. We'll also, if you go to our website, we did set up a page today that also offers a discount for those of you who are not familiar with Plotter, who'd like to try it. There's a nice 15% off, I believe, here. Let me go back to my banner so I have that up. And I encourage you to pop over there. And when you sign up, we'll also get your email and we'll send you the full replay of this. And of course, there's all kinds of questions. We're both available for that. And let's see here. Was there anything else we wanted to cover today in terms of plotting as a self-editor? Oh, we talked about how this works for the authors, and it's essential for editors too, to use this process. So it really is helpful if you
Yeah.
want.
Well, yeah, to that note, I use this with my editing clients too. And because basically, like, I'm editing a friend of mine's book now that I've edited a lot of his books, and I pull all of his scenes out into Plotter. And then
Exactly.
I can tell him, see, this is why this doesn't work.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, okay. Because visually he can see it now, right? It's not
Mhm.
me as an editor saying, hey, man, I don't like this part of your thing or whatever, right? Instead, he can visually see and go, oh, that doesn't line up with what I intended to do. All right.
Exactly.
Well, now you need to fix it, right?
Exactly.
So that's part of this process is just going, okay. So I use it with my editing clients and coaching clients all the time, especially developmental editing. Is I'm like, okay, so because Plotter is a downloadable app, but it's also got a web app now. The web app is the bomb for working with an editor because you can work on the same file at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So while I'm with one of my coaching clients, I can be typing something to change his Plotter file, and he sees it happen in real time, right?
Exactly.
So he sees it change. So anyway, so those things are super, super cool. I mean, from an editor standpoint, it saves you time because you can show your client, hey, this is what's happening. And, it works. It's beautiful, beautiful system.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's really essential that you understand how this works and how it works together, because you can also come in with questions. You may or may not know how to fix it, but those kind of consultations with your editor are so essential in solving it, because you can use your editor to do your grammar, spelling, punctuation, all that syntax and things like that. And that's just easy cake for them. But when you get to really dig in on the developmental level and you get to ask the questions about your plot, your character development, and how to make this flow from one site to the next, and you have the questions prepared in advance, now we're really getting to dig in now. And an
Yep.
editor, it's great. It's they're your private trainer, they're coaching you and they're digging in. If you can solve these problems in advance, again, you're going to save time and energy and a lot of money, because you may be able to go straight into line editing, copy editing, and get out the door. So again, these tools help you to become a better writer. They help you to become a better editor, and they will save you money in the long run. So it's kind of a small investment day to day that adds up. It would take you years to make up the difference,
Yep.
years and years of how much you'll save. because it really is. Editing is expensive. It's thousands of dollars depending upon who you're working with and how it's going to be done. So it's really essential to know what you're doing there.
Yeah, and any developmental edit, you should take that as a writing class. You get a one-on-one writing class with a professional editor. So
Yeah.
take what they say to heart and
Yeah.
apply it to your next book.
Exactly.
And then you won't need them as much. And that's the
No.
whole idea. I'm much more about teaching a man to fish than about catching you fish.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. So we have all of these here. I just want to thank everyone for coming. And again, we advertise these and we promote these. We send out our invitations through Eventbrite. Let's see here. And so I want to make sure that if you are familiar with Eventbrite, please join us there. We'll have more of these coming up. Troy, I want to thank you for joining us today. This has been really fun and exciting. And it's so great to bring in some new insight into how to better edit. We just keep going into self-editing because I think that's what we're here for. We can talk about using an editor, but really learning how to do it yourself so that you can carry on and will have a long-term relationship in getting more books done faster and better, stronger, faster. Bionic Man.
Exactly. That's a flashback.
Yeah. I felt it coming on right there. You were talking about Trek, and I was like, oh yeah. And again, do want to mention that we do have a 15% off if you go to plotter.com, go.plotter.com/first editing. You can use the code editing, and that'll get you 15% off. So we encourage you to try it. You can cancel it anytime, but it's definitely a tool. It's one of those things. Try it. If it works for you, you'll love it. And you can't hurt yourself there. So again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Troy, thank you for coming today. And we'll see you again in a couple more weeks, and we'll keep self-editing. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.